Hello everyone, welcome back to the Stitches in STEM YouTube channel. My name's Michaela, I am a knitter from Dublin, Ireland, and this is podcast episode number 15. In today's episode I have one finished object and a lot of whips. It's actually a very whip heavy episode. I have worked on all of my projects, so anything that's on the needles in the last few weeks or few months I have worked on, even one that's been in hibernation for a long time. I've also been incredibly busy over the last couple of weeks, so I haven't had a lot of knitting time, and that little bit of knitting time has been spread across all of those projects. So all that to say, I have worked on everything, but some of the projects I don't have a lot of progress, I feel. But I'm going to show them anyway, so if that sounds like something you'd enjoy, please settle in, get comfortable, and we'll get started. Very briefly, what I'm wearing is the T #1 by My Favourite Things Knitwear, and I finished this, I think, in April of this year, so I would have discussed it in some podcast episodes back then. I am actually quite warm right now, even though we're fast approaching Christmas time. We just have the heating on in the house, so I'm very warm. So it's not a Christmassy, wintry jumper like I would like to be wearing, but it is green, so that's something. And I also have my Christmas tree, my little Christmas tree in the background here, so I hope I'm giving you Christmas vibes right now because I'm really feeling it. I also wanted to say thank you to everyone who watched the last video or left a comment. In terms of views, it actually did pretty poorly compared to my other videos, but I don't really mind that because there were such lovely comments that, you know, it doesn't really matter how much engagement I get. It's just more about the quality of the engagement. Quality, not quantity, right? So yeah, I had some really lovely comments. I had some really reassuring comments about the lighting situation because in that video it was quite, well, it wasn't even late in the day. It was like 3 o'clock or something, but it's obviously getting quite dark now, very early in the Northern Hemisphere. We're getting close to Christmas, so yeah, we're just getting a lot less daylight than we used to, and it was something that was kind of bothering me when I was filming. I could feel it getting so much darker, but there were a lot of reassuring comments not to worry about that. So it is actually the same time of day now, so it will get dark in this video, but I'm not going to worry about it this time. I did intend to film early this morning, so I got up early. The lighting in here was beautiful, but we actually went to get our Christmas tree today, and I didn't want to miss out on that, so I decided to just accept that my video will be getting darker and to enjoy the Christmas tree picking with my family. I did, however, have the foresight to film my B-roll footage this morning, so any B-roll footage you see in this video will have been taken this morning with much better lighting. And yeah, I think at least the B-roll footage is kind of important to take when there's good lighting because of the colours and stuff like that. So with all of that out of the way, let's just get into the video with my first and only finished object, which is a pair of vanilla socks. These are a gift for my boyfriend for Christmas, and the yarn that I used is Finally Fibers BFL nylon sock. I don't know the actual name of the base, but I know it's a BFL nylon blend, and the colour is Coral Reef, which has these gorgeous reds and yellows and purples in it. In the last episode I talked about how I was approaching these socks because I wasn't happy with how the cuff had looked, so my intention was to just knit the rest of the sock and actually pick up the stitches just below the cuff and work the cuff from the bottom up. One of the socks had the cuff done and the other one I actually hadn't started when I made that decision. So when I did the second sock, I just cast on with a long tail cast on and started knitting a stockinette tube because I didn't see the point in wasting my time doing a cuff if I was going to cut it out in the end anyway. So that's what I did, and it actually worked out fine. So the first sock I picked up stitches just below the cuff and I cut out the cuff, and the cuff that I cut off was about, I don't know how many rows, I'd say it's about 12 or 13 rows, whereas the cuff I was going to do was 15 rows, so I didn't see the point in reusing this yarn because I would have had to join it again at the start of the cuff and join more yarn to actually finish the cuff, and that would have meant like 5 or 6 ends to weave in just in the cuff, and I didn't think that that would look great. I didn't like the idea of having all of that bulk of woven in ends in the cuff, so unfortunately I did end up with a little bit of wasted yarn. I might use maybe, it depends on the weight of this. I think this is about 3 grams or something, maybe 2 grams. So it could be good for some colour work in the cuff of another sock or something. We'll see. I'll definitely hang on to it for now anyway. It's not going into the bin. I also have 40 grams left of this yarn. So yeah, I'll find something to do with it. So they are, as I said, they are a gift from my boyfriend, but I have taken his measurements, all the circumference measurements. So like the leg, the heel diagonal, the heel diagonal here, across here, and the foot circumference, and obviously the foot length. Except for the foot length, all of the measurements are actually the same as my foot, so I was able to try these on as I went to make sure they fit, and they fit really great around the leg. Obviously the foot is kind of harder to judge because the actual length is bigger than my foot. Like up here they feel fine, but then down here they start to feel a bit funny just because I've got all that extra room at the top of the sock. They're not blocked, by the way. I just put them on blockers for presentation purposes. I thought they looked better. I also did some decreases in the leg, which I mentioned last week. So I started with 60 stitches and I decreased down to 56 about halfway down, and then I increased back to 64 for the heel diagonal. And all of that feels really, really great on my own leg. So I think that's something I'm going to do in any socks that I make in the future. I will say that even after redoing the cuff, the reason I wasn't happy with it was because it didn't seem to have the same elasticity or the same memory as previous 2x2 rib cuffs that I've knit. And I wasn't sure if it was because I was using a different needle than usual or if it was the nature of the yarn. So when I reknit it, I did it on my usual needle, which should turn out fine, but it actually is still quite loose, and it just doesn't, it just doesn't seem like it has the same elasticity or the same memory. So at this point, I'm actually starting to think it's just a quality of the yarn that's making it maybe not cinch in as much. It's still fine, it still fits, but it doesn't feel as secure around my calf as my usual 2x2 ribbed cuffs. So this is probably the most rustic sock yarn I've ever used, so I don't know if that's something to do with it. I don't really have something to compare it to. Other rustic sock yarns that I've used, like ones that aren't necessarily a superwash merino, have still been a superwash of some sort, so like a superwash BFL. Even though it felt rustic, this feels a lot more rough and ready. So I don't really have anything to compare to, but I would definitely use this yarn again. I would just do maybe a half twisted rib for the cuff or a full twisted rib if I feel up to it. But yeah, I would definitely use the yarn again. It feels really nice. I think it's going to feel lovely after blocking. I think the colour knit up really, really evenly, which I'm really happy about. I've had experiences with yarns in the past that have this kind of micro striping effect. Well, I suppose the foot is more micro stripy than the leg. Sorry, I should block my face so it focuses. The foot is a little bit more micro stripy than the leg. But in my experience, yarns that have this micro striping effect sometimes look vastly different between the two socks. Like maybe the bands are different sizes or different patterns. But for this pair, I think the socks turned out pretty identical. Like the foot at least looks identical. There's slight differences in the leg. The one on the right, the yellow looks more like a classic yellow, whereas on the left, I think it looks a bit more orangey, but it's a very slight difference and they still look like a matching pair of socks, which is not something I've always experienced with yarns that tend to micro stripe. So yeah, I'm really happy with this. Oh, definitely knit them again. Even the heels turned out pretty identical. One side of the heel is purple on both socks and the other side is yellow. So I think that's pretty impressive. So I'm pretty happy with that. And yeah, I would definitely knit with this yarn again. Finally Fibres, I don't know if I mentioned, it's studio down in Cork. So always love to support Irish yarn dyers. I feel a bit of a tickle in my throat. If you can hear it, I apologise. I do feel fine. I don't think I'm sick, but yeah, I'm all of a sudden aware of this need to clear my throat constantly. So I apologise if I sound a bit, if I have a bit of a vocal fry, it's not intentional. My first whip is my Karla Cardigan by Anne Bensel, and maybe I'll put this on a hanger. So I hope that's a little bit easier to see. I'll put in some B-roll footage as well, but first I'll just show it on the hanger. So this is a pattern by Anne Bensel. It's an all-over mosaic colourwork cardigan, and I am knitting this as a gift for my mum for Christmas. The yarn that I'm using is La Manna Como Grande in the colour Silk Grey, which is the white colour, and Slate Grey is the main colour. And I'm knitting this on 4.5mm needles, and all the ribbing is done on 4mm needles. In the last episode I had one sleeve done and I had done the collar, but I wasn't happy with it because it was a bit too tight. So since then I've reknit the collar and I made an effort to knit the twisted rib a good bit looser, and I think it feels much better now. It's still not as open as I would like it to be, but it doesn't feel uncomfortably tight, and I don't think it's going to be worn with the buttons closed all the way up anyway. In the B-roll footage you'll be able to see that one side of the body looks a little bit shorter than the other, and that's because I had actually knit the button band on that side. I picked up the number of stitches indicated in the pattern, but I found that it was too little. It was actually pulling the fabric in, so I ripped out the button band. I actually picked it out from the pickup edge, so I went in at my needle and I just kind of pulled out that first row of stitches so I could weigh this, and it's 14 grams in case you're curious. And I did that just because I wanted to see how much yarn I would need to finish the cardigan. I've also finished the second sleeve since the last episode. The sleeve pickup I found was actually quite low. It worked out at about 1 and 2 stitches, which when I was picking it up I just felt like this couldn't be right, but I think it actually looks fine. I can't remember the last time I had to trust the process so much with a pattern, but I think it's working out okay. I have had a few stumbling blocks, but overall I'm very happy with how it's turning out. I am putting it on pause for the moment because I'm waiting for another ball of yarn to arrive, which I talked about in the last episode. As of today, it is actually the 14th of December, and if you've just swiped down from the top of your phone to check your calendar and you see that it's like the 20th when you're watching this, I'm not surprised. It's going to take me about a week to edit this video, so just a disclaimer, yes, your calendar is not wrong. It is probably the 20th or 21st by the time I get this uploaded. But yeah, as I am sitting here, it's Saturday 14th of December and that extra ball of yarn hasn't arrived, and I'm just a tiny bit concerned. So it has to arrive this coming week or else the cardigan's not getting done before Christmas, because I just don't think it's going to happen. I am going to weave in all of the ends over the next week while I'm waiting for that ball to arrive, just so that when it does arrive, all I have to do is finish the cardigan in terms of the knitting, and I don't have to worry about anything else. I am also thinking about adding another pattern repeat to the body. So there's two options in the pattern for the length. There's a shorter and a longer option, and the only difference is one pattern repeat. So I actually did knit the longer option, which has 7 pattern repeats in the front of the body, I believe. Well, I could just count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 pattern repeats in the body, and it's the perfect length for me, but I think my mum would prefer it to be longer, so I'm going to see if I have enough yarn to add another pattern repeat. And that's actually the main reason why I weighted this. I want to make sure obviously that I have enough yarn to work the button band, which is going to be the last thing I do. So I'll just have to see how much yarn I have. One ball of that yarn is 50 grams. So if the button band requires at least 30 grams, which it will, that means I'll have 20 grams left to do a pattern repeat. And I know from knitting the body that I got 2 full pattern repeats out of one ball, which means that one pattern repeat weighed about 25 grams. So yeah, it might be a little bit of a stretch. The other thing is that the pattern repeat has, it obviously has that mosaic colorwork stripe, and then you do 12 rows of the grey color. I'm wondering if I could just not do the full 12 rows if needed, and just maybe do 9 or 10 and then start the ribbing. Would that look weird? That's what I'm asking you guys. So that is my question for today. If you think that it would look weird, I'll show you. Let me hold up the cardigan again. So you can see, sorry, here. After the last stripe, there's 12 rows of the grey, and then you do about 6 rows of the ribbing. I can't remember how many exactly, but I'm wondering if I don't have enough yarn to do a full 12 rows, would it look really strange if I did 10 or 9 maybe? What do you think? I'd love to know your thoughts on this, because yeah, I'm not sure. I think it would be nice to try and use up all of the yarn. So I definitely have enough of the white colour to do another pattern repeat. I also have a bit left over from the sleeve, so I might actually have enough to do a full pattern repeat. That all remains to be seen, but yeah, I am just hoping that it arrives on time. That's my main concern right now. I did say that I was hoping the knitting would be done by this episode, but of course that can't be helped if I don't have the yarn. I actually love the yarn. Sorry, just speaking of the yarn, I love the yarn. It is so soft, and I've said it before, so this is not new. It's just so nice to work with. It feels so nice on my skin when I wear it. I've also said it a few times that I want this cardigan for myself. That is still true. I still intend to make one for myself in the future. I initially thought that I would use a different yarn, but I'd be quite happy to use this again. It blocks out beautifully. Like before blocking, it's already very soft, and then when you block it, it's just like next level softness. It's amazing. I keep stroking it. It feels so nice. So the body is blocked, but the sleeves aren't. And I think I'll throw in some close-up footage so you can see the difference in the stitches, because I actually do think there's quite a difference in the evenness of the stitches. So that is my Karla cardigan. My next whip is one that I left out of last episode because I hadn't made much progress, and that is my Ingrid Sweater by Petite Knit. Get the hanger again. I keep telling myself I don't need a hanger for this one, and then I hold it up in front of the camera and I'm like, this definitely needs a hanger. So this is a pattern by Petite Knit, and the yarn that I'm using is from Eru Ireland, which is an Irish wool brand, and they kindly gifted me the yarn for this pattern. It's their BFL Romney blend, which is a sport weight yarn, and I'm using the colour Sea Song, just this gorgeous seafoam green colour. And I'm holding it with Gepard Kidsetta in the colour Light Sea Green. So both a seafoam colour. I think they're a perfect match for each other. They go really well together. I'm knitting the size small, and I'm knitting on 3.5mm needles. Since the last episode, I've bound off the body with a tubular bind off, and I think looks really good. I've done tubular bind off before, but sometimes it's a bit of a hit or miss in terms of it might flare or it might not be stretchy enough, like it goes one way or the other. But I think I managed to hit the sweet spot this time. I'm really happy with how it looks. Again, I'll throw in some B-roll footage because I think you can actually see what the bind off looks like in that. I've also done the collar, which I will be frogging because I don't like how it looks. Again, I'll show the B-roll footage, but you can see that it's quite stiff. It sticks up. It is, I think the problem is that it's too big. And I think the problem is that my 1x1 rib is too loose. My 2x2 is also quite loose, but that lays flat like it should. And then the 1x1 just goes like this. It just sticks up around my neck and there's a big gap in between the collar and my neck, which I don't like. It looks bizarre and I'm actually a bit embarrassed to show this on camera, but that's just the way it is. This is my motivation to get my ribbing neater and tighter. I went down 0.5 millimeter for the ribbing, so I knit the collar on 3 millimeter needles. And I do think it's a gauge problem, but I don't want to go down any further needle sizes because I think that'll be too uncomfortable on my hands. So I am actually going to just reknit this on 3 millimeter needles, but I'm going to use shorter tips. So I have 4-inch tips that I use for sleeves usually, and I'm going to use those for the collar because I do think I tend to knit a bit tighter with them, or it's easier to knit tighter. I think with the longer needles, I know myself, it doesn't feel right. Like it's a long skinny needle with a yarn that's probably too thick for that needle, and I know from my own experience in the past that that will affect my tension and the way I knit. So I am going to use the shorter tips and I'm going to take my time with it, and I'm just going to try and tension my yarn tighter, and hopefully that will work. But all of that is for the future because I just want to do the sleeves now, and I'll address the collar at the very end, I think. So the next thing I'm going to do is pick up for the sleeves and work away on those. And that's all I have to say about my Ingrid sweater for today. So it doesn't look like I made much progress, but the tubular bind off obviously takes some time. So I did sink some time into this in the last 2 weeks. My next whip is my Mackenzie scarf by Sari Nordland. I'm starting to think I need to be putting this in B-roll footage because it's getting quite long. And I have a progress keeper showing where I was with the last episode. This is from Baubles and Berries. It's got a little beetle on it. It's very cute. But yeah, this is a pattern by Sari Nordland. The yarn is from Ballihora Fibres. It's her 4-ply sock base. This was also gifted to me by Sierra, who runs Ballihora Fibres. The colours are Lake Muskery, which is the dark colour, and Wild Atlantic Way is the light blue. Really, really lovely colours. Again, another Irish dyer who I am so happy to support. I've bought her yarn before and will continue to buy it in the future. This was obviously gifted, as I said, but I have bought it and used it before, and I'd highly recommend it. I really love it. The pattern, as I said, is by Sari Nordland, and it's a 2-colour brioche scarf with these diagonal garter stitch stripes going across it. And I don't have much to add in terms of, there was no issues since the last episode. There's no major milestones because it is just the same repeat now. So, although I will say that someone in the last video left a very helpful comment which taught me a lot about brioche. This is my first time doing brioche, so yeah, I felt like I got a bit of a lesson in brioche from that comment. She basically mentioned how the amount of yarn in the yarn overs will affect the final size, because it makes sense now, but I didn't think about it. The more yarn in the yarn over, the more it will stretch vertically. So I had talked in that video about this scarf stretching and how I predicted that it would grow to 78 inches based on my gauge and a mid-project block that I had done. But I actually think it will grow more than that now, which is still fine with me. Unless it grows to like 100 inches, I'm still going to be happy with it. Like, the range of length that I am happy with this scarf to be is quite wide. If it's anywhere between 78 and 95 inches, that's fine with me. I actually think on the longer end of that would be nicer because it means I don't have to knit as much and I still get a long scarf. So we'll see. I'm really, really curious to see exactly how long this blocks out to be. So yeah, only a minor update, but I wanted to share because that was a very useful comment and maybe it will be useful to some of you guys as well. My next whip is one that hasn't seen the light of day in quite a while, and it's my Ranunculus hanger. So this is a pattern by Midori Hirase. If you don't know this pattern, where have you been? Everyone and their mother has knitted this pattern, and now it's my turn. I am knitting it in Suic Whisper Lace, which is a wool and silk blend. I think it's 60% wool and 40% silk. sorry, 70% wool and 30% silk. And the colour that I'm using is number 133, and I'm actually holding it double because it is a lace weight yarn and I'm knitting it on 6mm needles. So I cast this on in August, maybe September. And when I last showed it, I had nearly finished the body. Actually, the body hasn't changed at all. This is where it was the last time I showed it. And I had done a mid-project block to check the length, at which point it grew a lot in weight. Sorry, it grew a lot in width, but it shrank a little bit in the length. After blocking, I picked up the sleeve and I started working in magic loop, and then I just put this into hibernation because other priority projects start to pop up, like the gift knitting, the Karla Cardigan and things like that. I very rarely put projects into hibernation. It kind of stresses me out when they don't have a category, like they're either finished object or an active WIP, and I don't like an in-between kind of phase. Another reason I stopped working on this was because I was, as I said, working the sleeve on magic loop and I was getting some weird tension issues. I wasn't getting laddering, I was actually getting the complete opposite, where the first 3 stitches after the magic loop join were really tight and I didn't like how it looked, and it was just bothering me as I was knitting it, so I didn't enjoy knitting it. And I also didn't enjoy the extra motions that obviously come with magic loop, like pulling the cord through and everything. It obviously takes a bit more time than just knitting in the round, so it was just putting me off for a project that I didn't love in the first place. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it, I liked it. When I cast it on, I was looking forward to working on it, and I liked the idea of having the project, I liked the idea of the process, but it wasn't like a passion project. It was just something I cast on when I needed something to cast on, and for that I needed it to be in the round stockinette and, you know, something that would work up pretty fast and be mindless, and the fact that it was magic loop was just really putting me off. If you're very eagle-eyed and you have a great memory, you might think that this looks the exact same as it did in the episode I showed it last, but I have actually ripped out the sleeve and re-knit it on smaller needles, as you can see here, because the laddering was just really bothering me. I had to buy the 4-inch 6mm needles, so the regular ones I use are 5 inches, which are too long to work sleeves on. So I did have to buy the 4-inch ones. I usually don't buy extra tips or cords unless I know I'm going to use them more than once, and I don't use 6mm needles ever. So I was really reluctant to buy short needles, but I knew this project would never leave the hibernation cave, and if it did, I would hate knitting it and I would strongly dislike wearing it if it had that weird laddering in the sleeves. So I figured it would be worth buying the short tips, and it was. I don't regret it at all. I've made a lot of progress on the sleeve. I think that all of that work that I have in the sleeve now was done in the space of a weekend, and that was in between other things that I had going on that weekend, you know, social things, going to the gym and stuff like that. So I think it was definitely worth getting those short tips. The pattern actually calls for an I-cord bind off, but I'm going to do ribbing. As for the body, the pattern calls for 8 centimeters of ribbing. I've decided I'm going to 6. So I'm going to do about 6 centimeters more of stockinette and then 6 centimeters of ribbing. The pattern actually calls for a twisted rib or half twisted rib, one or the other, which I didn't know, and it calls for the same in the neckline, which I didn't realize, so I just did a regular 1x1 rib. So I'm just going to do a regular 1x1 rib in the hem and the cuffs to match that. The appeal of doing a half twisted rib, and if I ever made this again, I would do a half twisted or twisted rib, whatever one the pattern calls for, because I just think with that wider neckline, it looks nice to have nice tight ribbing. The interesting thing about this yarn and this project is how much it changed with blocking. So it actually grew a lot in width and it shrunk in length. So the body has been blocked and the sleeve has not. So when I am knitting the sleeve length, I'm taking into account the fact that it will shrink, and I know how much it should shrink by. So my gauge before blocking is 26 rows. I'm talking about the row gauge, 26 rows in 10 centimeters. And after blocking, it shrank to 28 rows in 10 centimeters. I need to keep that in mind when I'm knitting the sleeve. I'm going to knit it to the length I want and then do, I don't know, I'll have to maybe do some maths, or I can just knit it a couple centimeters longer and assume that it will shrink. I'm not too fussed about getting this completely perfect. As I said, it's not a passion project. It's something I casted on when I was in the mood to cast on something, and I'm just happy to have something that I can knit in the round, because none of my other projects are like stockinette knitting in the round. The last time I showed this, I also spoke about the collar and how it grew a lot with blocking, and I wasn't too happy about it, but I'm pleased to report now that it has grown on me, and I think I'll keep it the way it is. I'm not planning on changing it. If anything, I'll thread some elastic through it, or else do a row of crochet single stitches just to make sure it doesn't grow anymore. So I actually did have some updates for this one today, and I'm hopeful I can just continue working on this now and not put it back into hibernation. So you can definitely expect to see more of this one in the future. last whip is a new cast on, and it is, sorry, it's upside down, the Levitate Wrap by My Favorite Things Knitwear, which is just a plain kind of wrap cardigan with this double knit edging, which I really like. The yarn that I'm using is from Rowan, and it's from their little, they have like a little subgroup of yarns and patterns that are relatively new called Mode at Rowan. And they gifted me this softest alpaca base to make this Levitate wrap. The colour is ash grey, and it is 70% alpaca, 7% wool and 23% polyamide, 130 meters in 50 grams. And I have compared this before to Camarosa Snefnog, I think, or if I haven't, I meant to. It's very similar in feeling, I think. I have worked with Camarosa Snefnog before, and I'm not sure I'd be able to tell the difference between the two of them. They're very similar. I cast this on pretty much straight after recording my last episode. I wasn't planning on casting it on. I really wanted to prioritise my gift knits, but my friend Kiliana very kindly gifted me the pattern, which was so nice of her. There was an Instagram post by the user KnitBoop, and she does an annual post. She calls it Get Your Yarn Wishes Granted. So you just comment below with your yarn wishes. It could be wishing for yarn, or wishing for a pattern, or wishing for a ball winder or something. So you can say, I'm looking for cream speckled yarn or something, and someone in the comments might reply and say, I have one in my stash, I can send it to you. So it's a really nice, thoughtful way of kind of sharing with the community and, you know, getting involved in the knitting community online, which is such a lovely community to begin with. But I had commented and said if I, you know, my yarn wishes would be a pattern for my wish list. And my friend Kiliana messaged me and was like, which pattern would you like? So I didn't actually expect someone like one of my friends to message me. So that was kind of surprising. It was so nice of her. And I told her that the Levitate wrap is next on my wish list, and I asked her, what's next on your wish list? And she told me, and I sent it to her. So we just bought each other patterns, which was really, really, really cute and wholesome. Anyway, so she gifted me the Levitate wrap pattern, and that was my excuse to cast on. So I haven't made much progress, just the back panel. I'm knitting this on 4.5mm needles, so it's going kind of fast. And the back panel is almost done. The thing I like about the My Favorite Things knitwear patterns, I'm not sure if she does it in all of her patterns, but at least in the Levitate wrap, and I can't remember if she does it in the T number 1 either, she tells you how many rows to knit, but also she says your piece should be X centimeters long by now. So if your row gauge is off, which mine is most of the time, you can just knit more or fewer rows to reach that length. Most of the time the patterns either mention knit until X centimeters or knit for X number of rows. And if it says X number of rows and you don't have row gauge, you'll have to do some maths with the pattern row gauge to figure out how long it's supposed to be, and you knit yours to the same length. So I like that My Favorite Things knitwear includes both of those things in the instructions. So on that note, you know, she indicated to knit the back panel X number of rows, and she says it should be this long by now, and mine was not that long because my row gauge was tighter than hers, I think. Yeah, tighter. So I need to knit a few extra rows to reach the length indicated in the pattern. But I will keep a note of how many rows I do so I can match it on the front. I really like how the increases look on the back. You kind of have this thicker band before the increases, so I think that's a really nice effect. I don't know why I like it so much. It's just really satisfying to the eye. This yarn feels like a cloud. I'm not kidding. Sometimes, obviously when I'm knitting, I'm looking at my stitches and I'm looking at the needles and I'm looking at my fingers, and the project should be resting in my hands, but I tend to get these moments where I'm like, am I holding the project? Is the project touching my skin because I can't feel it? And I look down and it is. It just feels like holding air. It's so light and so lofty. I thought it would be sticky. I thought it would kind of be one of those yarns where you have to, you know, the stitches don't really open when you stick your needle in, but it's not like that at all. It's been absolutely fine to work with. And yeah, as I said, I haven't really been focusing on this one too much, but once I get the Karla Cardigan done, I think I'll be able to put a lot more time into it. Another thing that kind of pushed me into casting it on was, it was the 1st of December and I was scrolling on Instagram and everyone had their advent cast-ons, and I was like, I want an advent cast on. So that was my excuse. That and the fact that Kiliana had sent me the pattern. 2 very good motivators, I think. But yeah, I'm okay with this not being a priority right now. I'm just happy to leave it as is until I can get some of those more high priority knits off the needles. Moving on to acquisitions and plans. I actually technically do have an acquisition, but it's not something I bought recently. I bought it back in June, and it arrived last month, and I'm only opening it now. And from all those clues, you can probably guess that it is an advent. It is my Olivia and Oliver Fibres sock set advent for 2024. And I have opened the first 3 because it's a weekly advent. You're supposed to open it every Sunday. I'm actually opening it on the Saturday because I don't know, it's just like the first thing I like to do on the weekend. You know, I get through a hard week of work and it gives me something to look forward to on a Saturday morning. I think if the last one were to be opened on Christmas Day and it fell weekly like that, like in the weeks, you know, if Christmas Day is on a Wednesday this year, so if it was like every Wednesday, then I would stick to it. But the fact that the last one is due to be opened on the 28th, I think, or 29th, I'm kind of like, it doesn't really make a difference if I open it on the 28th or the 29th. And like, you know, this weekend, it doesn't really make a difference if I open it on the 14th or 15th. So I am opening them every Saturday. I have opened the first 3. As I said, at the time of uploading, it will probably be the 20th or 21st of December. So if you have this advent calendar, you should definitely have the first 3 opened. If for whatever reason you have this advent and you haven't opened the first 3 sock sets, maybe look away now if you don't want to be spoiled. The first one was, the advent is called Changing Seasons, so I'm assuming it's to do with the seasons of the year. The first one, which was spring themed, was this beautiful pink speckled yarn, and so far this is my favourite one of the whole advent that I've opened. I wanted to cast this on straight away as soon as I opened it, and I'm really, really obsessed with this. I think it's a gorgeous colour. The main colour is called A Bloom, and the contrast colour is called Breeze. So far, each sock set has also come with a little stitch marker from Terra Clay, who I believe is a Netherlands-based clay artist, and she also provided stitch markers for last year's advent as well. So I already have a few from her, and I think they're all beautiful. And the stitch markers are themed after the seasons as well, which is really cute. So this one just got a little flower. The next one is summer themed, and the main colorway is called Coastal, and the contrasting colorway is called Palm. And I love that contrast colorway. That green is just stunning. The main color is like a turquoise teal, and it's got speckles of dark green and a little bit of brown throughout it. And for autumn, which is the one I opened today, the main color is called Flannel and the contrast color is called Spice. All of these are on a 75% merino and 25% nylon base. I'm really happy with my decision to get this advent. I didn't want to get another mini skein one. I did love my one from last year, but I just think a sock set was a little bit more appealing to me this year. So yeah, I'm absolutely delighted that she decided to do one because I love all of her yarns. So it was like the stars aligned when she announced that she was doing a sock set advent. So with that out of the way, let's just briefly talk about my plans. And this is definitely for my own benefit as well as for your entertainment, because I just have so many thoughts in my head that I feel like I need to vocalize and organize. And I obviously have a lot of whips, so I want to kind of decide what's happening I want to kind of decide what's happening with each one, make a plan for them, and because it is kind of stressing me out having a lot. I know it's like, why do you keep casting them on then? I don't know. I don't usually cast on this many. I usually have a little bit more willpower. I'm blaming the fact that it's Christmas time and I've been doing a lot of gift knitting, but at the same time I want to be knitting for myself, so I think that's part of the reason. But anyway, I just have plans for what I want to get done by the end of the year. Obviously, the gift knits, I want to have them done by Christmas, so that's my Karla Cardigan. I would also like to cast on another pair of socks for my sister. I have 2 sisters, so I already made one for one sister, and now I have to make another one for the other sister. So I'm going to use this yarn from my stash. I did make a pair of socks in this during the year, or maybe it was last year. This is from Townhouse Yarns, which is a dye studio in Dublin. And the colourway is called Toffee Pop. It's kind of a almondy kind of colour base with speckles of yellow, orange, navy and fuchsia through it. So this is actually about 55 grams, which is loads considering I made a full pair of socks out of this already. So I can actually get a full length pair of socks out of that. Whether or not I'm going to do a full length pair of socks remains to be seen, because I'm kind of sick of knitting gift socks, and yeah, I'm thinking I might do a shorty pair, which would leave me with an awkward amount left over. So I don't know, we'll see. I had mentioned in my last video that I wanted all of my gift knit socks done by the 11th. As I've mentioned a few times, today is the 14th and I haven't even started the 3rd pair. So am I even going to get a 3rd pair of socks done before Christmas? If they're short socks, it's highly likely that I will. If they're full length socks, it's still possible, but I won't enjoy it. So we'll see. I really don't know what I'm going to do about that. The other thing I was thinking is that the whole reason I'm making socks for my sisters and for my boyfriend is actually because it's my birthday at the end of January. It's such a weird thing to say. It's my birthday, so I'm knitting things for other people. But we're going to Disneyland Paris for my birthday because it is a big birthday. I'm going to be 30. It feels weird to say that. I'm going to be 30 and we're going to Disneyland as a family and with my boyfriend. It's going to be very cold in Paris. So I thought it would be nice to knit socks for them because they're all coming to Disneyland to celebrate my birthday, which is really nice. I'm really looking forward to it. So all that to say, I might be able to get away with not giving them at Christmas and just giving them as like a we're going to Disneyland present, you know? So we'll see. Again, much remains to be seen there, but for the moment, I don't want to cast on another pair of socks because I just have so many whips. I haven't decided when I'm going to cast them on or what kind of socks I'm going to make. Those are just my thoughts out there for the world now. Aside from my gifts, I would like to finish my Ingrid sweater by the end of the year, which I think is doable. And I'd also like to add a third stripe to my Mackenzie scarf. So I'm actually halfway through the third stripe at the moment, so I definitely think that's doable. I have about 100 rows left to go then to reach the end of the third stripe, which sounds like a lot, but they actually go quite fast. I have no plans for my Levitate wrap. As I said, I just cast it on because I wanted something to cast on, and it's not a priority knit for me. Once I have the Karla cardigan done, I think I will be able to focus on it more, but for now I'm happy to just let it be. The other thing I want to do is to fix a finished object from last year, and that is my Celeste sweater by Petite Knit. I was obsessed with this pattern when I first saw it. I was obsessed from the moment she like teased the first image of it. I knew I wanted to make it, and I had a trip to Stockholm that coincided very nicely with the release of the pattern, so I could go and buy yarn in person. So I bought Peer Gynt, which is the recommended yarn, and oh, I was just so excited. I was excited about the pattern, I was excited about the yarn, I was so excited to cast on. It was just, I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I have not worn it once since finishing it. The reason is that I hate the fit. So I met Gage, the project went well, I felt like things were going smoothly, I didn't see any issues until I bound off, blocked it, I bound it off and then tried it on, and I hated it. It was ballooning out at the body and cinching in a lot at the ribbing. The same with the sleeves, they were ballooning out, but the ribbing was much tighter, and it just really, really bothered me. So I aggressively blocked the ribbing, which did help loosen it a bit, but the other problem was that it was too long. So it was my first time doing a tubular bind off. It took me forever, and I did not want to unpick it. So I did something that was equally as tedious. I picked up stitches all the way around about 2 inches above the ribbing, and I picked up again closer to the ribbing. So there was about a 2-inch gap, which I then just cut out, and I grafted the two live ends back together. My grafting job was a bit messy, but I just didn't care at the time. I was actually pretty pleased with it. I convinced myself that I would actually wear it then, so I was happy to be like, okay, that's done now. Well done, Michaela. Pat on the back. And then I still haven't worn it. So I do feel like this jumper is like my rejected child because I love it. I love the pattern. I love the yarn. I want to love it. I want to wear it, but it's literally been sitting on a shelf for the past year. So I want to fix it, which will basically entail unpicking the tubular bind off, removing the ribbing, re-knitting the ribbing at a larger gauge. So the stockinette was all knit at 3.5mm needles, and the ribbing was knit on 3mm needles. I am just going to re-knit it on 3.5mm needles. You can see in the pattern that it doesn't cinch in either in the sample photos. It actually just goes straight down. It's funny because I think unpicking the bind off now is actually an easy job. Like, I don't mind doing it. It's just crazy how perspective changes. Like, back then I would rather have done the even more tedious job of, as I said, picking up the stitches in 2 rounds, cutting it and sewing it back together. What was I thinking? Like, it's so easy just to unpick the bind off. I do it all the time when I'm not happy with the ribbing. So it's just funny how your perspective changes. So that is what I'm going to do now. I am going to redo the ribbing. I'm also going to do the same on the cuffs, and I am going to make the sleeves about 1 inch longer as well. I'll probably do the sleeves first, just so I can make sure that I am actually happy with the ribbing on 3.5mm needles before I do it on the body, because it's obviously a lot more to do on the body. So if I wasn't happy with it, I don't want to waste my time doing the whole ribbing on the body, binding off, and then realizing I don't like how that looks either. So yeah, that's something I'm really excited to do. I want to wear it. I want to wear it to work. I want to show it off. I mean, like, I made this. So yeah, that is definitely something that I'm going to do over the Christmas holidays. Again, I want to clear some of my projects off the needles first, but that is a priority for this year. I do have plans for next year. I am coming up with a tentative Make 9, and I would also like to go over my Make 9 2024. I think I might do a video about that over the Christmas holidays. I'm not going to do an everything I knit in 2024. That is just far too much work. I love watching other people's, but it would take me about 4 hours to record that alone, and that's without the editing, without the planning. Nightmare. I can't do it. I'm sorry. It takes too much time. Well, with all that being said, that is everything that I have to share for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more, please subscribe using the button down below. And if you want to leave a comment telling me what you're working on, please do. As I said before, I love getting inspiration from the comments. I love looking up the patterns that you all mentioned and looking at the yarns that you all mentioned. I have found so many new patterns and yarns from reading the comments, so that's my favorite part of uploading these videos. And until the next episode, happy knitting. Bye.